Today we're going to check out Ogdensburg, a city at the top of New York. It sits where the Oswegatchie River joins the St. Lawrence, right along the Canada border. As the only city in St. Lawrence County, it's long been a hub for trade and travelers. And in this video, I'm going to try and take you through how this northern river city came to be. The area of Ogdensburg was once covered by glacial Lake Iroquois, which stretched far beyond today's Lake Ontario. When the glacier holding it back began to melt, the water poured out into what became the St. Lawrence River. As the lake drained away, it left behind clay and silt, creating the flat and fertile land we see today. This rich land soon became home to indigenous peoples who traveled, hunted, and fished across the region. Over time, the people of the Longhouse developed settlements with farms and shared living spaces. In this region stood Swagatch, an old Haudenosaunee village located near a trail that ran up from the south. By the early 1500s, Europeans began exploring the area, following rivers, and interacting with local communities. Jacques Cartier named the St. Lawrence River after a Christian saint, and Samuel de Champlain followed decades later, bringing missionaries to live among native peoples. The spot where the Oswegatchie met the St. Lawrence was a good one, and perfect for future settlement. A Frenchman named Abbé François Piquet arrived in 1749 and built Fort de la Présentation, or if you prefer American, La Presentation, and it was a mission that drew some native families and secured French influence. A dam and sawmill were built, powering the settlement's first industrial activities. Meanwhile, rivalries between European powers were escalating toward open conflict in North America. By 1754, these tensions ignited the French and Indian War, part of the larger 7 Years' War involving Britain and France across the globe. In 1756, one of the French strategies was to cut off the supply line reaching Fort Oswego through the Mohawk Valley. They targeted British Fort Bull on the Oneida Carry in modern-day Rome. Lieutenant Gaspar Joseph Chaussegros de Leiry gathered forces at La Presentation. His army consisted of Canadian militia, French regular troops, and native allies. He led them through deep snow and wilderness, and attacked Fort Bull in a fierce surprise attack. After the victory, his force returned to La Presentation, having completed their mission with few losses. A few years later, British forces came back with a vengeance, capturing La Presentation and driving the French from the region. Under new control, it was renamed Fort Oswegatchie and became the main post in the northern area. The next year, during the Battle of the Thousand Islands, the British sealed their dominance along the river. Peace came with the Treaty of Paris, but before you could say revolution, war was back. And as a new conflict regarding independence unfolded, in 1777, British General Barry St. Leger began a campaign south from Montreal. He sailed past the Ogdensburg stretch of the St. Lawrence, ultimately aiming for Albany, but was soon stopped at Fort Stanwix and forced to retreat. The Patriot victory at Saratoga soon followed, turning the tide toward American independence and eventually bringing the war to an end. And even though they lost the war, the British in the Ogdensburg area didn't feel like leaving. It took them another decade or so to get out of there, even as pioneers started coming. The state was selling off northern lands, and 10 townships were mapped to invite settlers. Mr. Alexander Macomb acquired most of them, seeing potential in the vast wilderness. Investor Samuel Ogden bought part of that land, and his name would soon define a new community. With the help of Nathan Ford, the old fort site was revived, and a permanent settlement started to grow. Pioneer families came by boat and trail, carving homesteads out of the northern wilderness. The Jay Treaty formally fixed the border at the St. Lawrence, securing the settlement under American control. So you got a bunch of new villages, including Ogdensburg, growing steadily as more settlers moved into the region. Timber work, potash production, and farming became the heart of local trade and growth. As the population expanded, the region organized itself into St. Lawrence County in 1802. Ogdensburg was chosen as the county seat, and things like shipbuilding began to take off. During the War of 1812, British troops briefly captured the settlement, but trade and daily life soon resumed in peacetime. In 1817, the village of Ogdensburg was officially incorporated, spelled with an H at the end. Then Canton became the county seat, and a new lighthouse at the Ogdensburg harbor guided ships safely along the St. Lawrence. Some locals joined the Patriot War, taking part in cross-border raids to back reforms in Canada. And right after that, regular ferry service soon linked the establishment with neighboring Ontario towns. The Northern Railroad followed, connecting Ogdensburg to Boston. Farmers expanded butter and cheese production, and locals innovated by lining rail cars with ice, creating one of the earliest refrigerated boxcars. Then you have steamboats, and the Marine Railway busy repairing and launching ships. And on top of all of that, the Rome, Watertown, and Ogdensburg Railroad further extended the village's reach. The site was a major transportation hub and the quote-unquote New York of the North. Public spaces like Mansion Park, along with the Free Academy and several churches, shaped the social heart of the community. The village's growth and prominence led to its official status as the city of Ogdensburg in 1868, when it would also drop the H from its name. In the so-called Maple City, a pumping system drew water from the Oswegatchie, lumbering became a cornerstone of the economy, and street trolleys ran the length of St. Lawrence Avenue. Entertainment thrived at theaters and an opera house, with Horwood stained glass decorating windows all over. At the turn of the 20th century, the State Armory stood as a landmark, while booming dairy farms and factories drove regional growth. There was also growing hospitals and medical care that would evolve into today's Claxton-Hepburn Medical Center. At the same time, due to industrial pollution, the Oswegatchie River was nicknamed the River of Death, prompting the city to change its water source to the St. Lawrence. In those years, Marion Sanger Frank was working tirelessly to secure women the right to vote, rallying support across northern New York. And by the 1920s, the lighthouse had been raised, and prohibition spurred smuggling operations along the border. City Hall replaced the former Opera House, and in 1940, the Ogdensburg Agreement formalized U.S.-Canada defense cooperation during World War II. Post-war trade grew rapidly, and with the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959, ocean vessels could now reach places like Ogdensburg from the Atlantic. It was the only U.S. port on the Seaway, and a year later, the Seaway Skyway Bridge provided a direct highway connection to Ottawa. Even so, over time, the city settled into a slower rhythm, with commercial activity gradually easing along the river and rail lines. Today, Ogdensburg continues to thrive along the St. Lawrence River. It's the only American city on the river, and still an important port of commerce. Landmarks, outdoor spaces, and a lively downtown attract locals and tourists. And I hope you enjoyed the summary of how this northern river city came to be. Have a good one.